So now that this situation has arisen, undoubtedly they are having emotional difficulties, as they projected that they might. However, they do appear to be acting very professionally and trying to calm down these disturbances and move in as best as possible, according to the reports filed by my colleague Mark Potter. Now, throughout the day here, there's been a certain ebb and flow to the mood of demonstrators. There are long periods of quiet, and then anger erupts. There are chants going on and the like. There were some punches thrown at a Miami police officer who was not injured. But we've even seen a mother here who arrived on the scene with her little boy's face painted in red, and the little boy's with the words written on it, Elian, on his face. We also seen a number of teenagers here in the crowd, some of whom appear to be treating this as a social event, in that we hear them on their telephones laughing as they are describing the situation to the people on the other end of the telephone. Now, not long ago, members of the immediate family here who live here, 21-year-old Elian Gonzalez, that is Elian's cousin, who has been helping to care for him, along with other members of the family, left the home. There is Lazaro, the great uncle, as well. He's in the lead, barely out of camera range right there. The crowd parted for these relatives as they made their way to some vehicles to head to Miami International Airport. These relatives say that it is their intention, according to a family spokesperson, to fly to Washington, D.C. in an attempt to see Elian, to convince themselves that he is all right. Now, in the words of some of the representatives, they are demanding to see him. And Gregory Craig has said that he would discuss that matter in a few days after father and son have some time to spend together. Now, Miami's mayor accuses the government of being swept up in politics involving all of this.
It's not young Elian, it's not Miami, it's not America. The only winner will be Fidel Castro, because he would accomplish the ultimate goal that he wanted, to create disturbances in Miami. So I plead with all of Miami to protest within the law, to protest peacefully, to keep Miami nonviolent.
Unfortunately, not everyone has been non-peaceful, and there are more demonstrations planned for next Tuesday, non-violent ones, Cuban exiles promise. Susan Candiotti, CNN, reporting live in Miami.
For Cuban reaction to this day's dramatic developments in the Elian Gonzalez case, we go to CNN's Martin Savage, who is in Havana. Martin?
Gene, so far there has been no formal announcement coming from the Cuban government here in Havana pertaining to the events that transpired in Miami this morning. The Cuban people have been made aware of it. In fact, they've been kept up on the story throughout much of the early morning hours and into the afternoon. The story first broke on Cuban radio around 6:30 this morning. Since that time, it has also been told on Cuban television in the form of a communique, and video of the operation conducted on the home in Little Havana was shown, as well as some of the subsequent demonstrations and some of the violence that has taken place in the Miami area. When you talk to people out on the street today, they will tell you that they are pleased that Juan Miguel has now been reunited with his son, but they are not necessarily jubilant over how it was handled.
I think the people are happy. I expect the boy will be brought home soon with his father to our country, which is his real homeland.
It was abusive what they were doing with that child, and this action should have been taken a long time ago.
Now, as you look out on the streets of Havana today, it is pretty much a typical Saturday. Now, we should point out that the Cuban government has been urging people to remain calm. They've been announcing that both on television and on radio. The radio version stated that one of the concerns was if there was some sort of spontaneous demonstration of celebration, that those images would get back to the United States and could somehow harm the legal proceedings that are yet to come in this case. We anticipate that a formal statement will be forthcoming shortly, perhaps later this afternoon, or it may come at 5 o'clock this evening, the typical time of the broadcast protests that occur. The one that will happen today actually takes place at a city that's located about 2 hours to the east of Havana here. And Cuban President Fidel Castro is expected to be there. He had expected to be there even before today's events. Reporting live, Martin Savage, CNN, Havana.
Thank you, Martin. As soon as U.S. immigration agents seized Elian, the boy's father, Juan Miguel Gonzalez, was informed. He left the home in Bethesda, Maryland, where he has been living and waiting, and he went to the airport at Andrews Air Force Base. CNN's Patty Davis joins us from just outside the base with the latest from there. Patty.
6-year-old Elian Gonzalez arrived here at Andrews Air Force Base about 9:20 Eastern Time this morning. His father, as you said, Juan Miguel Gonzalez, met him here the first time the father and son have seen one another in around 5 months. Now, as you can see from these aerial pictures, Elian's father taking him into one of Andrews Air Force Base's buildings after his plane arrived here, presumably a place where they could get to know one another after being apart for so very long. We were told that they will spend several days here at Andrews Air Force Base, which is private. It's very secure. No onlookers, no media, no protesters allowed inside, no peering eyes as they get to know one another again. After that, they'll go to a location in the Washington, D.C. area, as yet not disclosed, where they will stay pending the court action surrounding the case. Now, only about 12 protesters have gathered here, a much different scene here outside of Andrews Air Force Base compared to what's happening in Miami. 12 protesters, they are carrying placards basically decrying the fact that Elian was seized by the federal government today, but they're really not much of a factor here. And in fact, I have to say that the news media by far outnumber the number of protesters who are here protesting the Elian seizure. Now, Juan Miguel Gonzalez's attorney, Greg Craig, applauded the government's action in seizing Elian today. He said that every avenue was pursued to try to resolve this case by negotiation.
We agreed to virtually all the demands contained in the Attorney General's proposal, but we would not compromise on the most critical issue of custody. The relatives in Miami, however, were intransigent on that issue and many others. To the very end, Lazaro Gonzalez placed roadblocks in the path of an orderly transfer of custody. He gave the Attorney General no alternative.
An Andrews Air Force Base spokesman says that there are guest suites here. This is an active Air Force base. Guest suites where presumably the boy and his father and his new wife and their new baby are staying. Beyond that, the spokesman said that the Air Force is not involved in this. This is completely a Department of Justice operation at this point. Judy?
All right, Patty Davis from her post just outside Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, close to Washington. We're going to take a break, and at this moment we want to say goodbye, farewell, at least for a while, to our international viewers. We're going to turn you over to CNN International. Meanwhile, Jean, Randall, and I will be back in just a moment with more ongoing coverage of the breaking story involving young Elian Gonzalez. Picture of Elian with his stepbrother, his young stepbrother, who I think is about 6 months old, and I don't have the stepbrother's name with me right now. I hope I can get that in just a moment. Elian, these pictures are very different from those of that we saw earlier in the morning when Elian was being taken from the home of his Miami relatives. He looked frightened. In one of those pictures, he was crying, but here you see several hours later with his father. These are the first pictures we have seen of young Elian with his father. The young half-brother is named Hiani, and there with Elian's stepmother and with his father, Juan Miguel. The reunion was described by the attorney, Greg Craig, the attorney for the father, as one, he said, just shortly after Elian and his father had been reunited, he said the boy had a wide smile on his face, so that they were in physical contact with one another. He saw none of the evidence of trauma or fear on the boy or in the boy that had been shown a few hours earlier. In fact, Gregory Craig said the boy seemed to be totally at ease. He was laughing with his father. We're told these pictures were taken by U.S. Marshals, presumably all at Andrews Air Force Base, because that's where Juan Miguel Gonzalez and his son and wife and and his other son have been for the last, four and a half hours since Elian arrived here in the Washington area. And now we want to take you to back up on this story a little bit, having to do with the decisions that went into the removal of Elian from the home of his relatives. We're told that aides are saying that the Attorney General ordered the agents to remove the boy as a last resort. There had been weeks of talks that had been going on with Elian's Miami relatives. The Justice Department says that those talks failed to resolve the custody battle. After Elian was seized, the Attorney General explained her decision, and CNN's Pierre Thomas joins us from the Justice Department, where he is now with more. Pierre.
Judy, again, we're told that the decision was a very difficult one for the Attorney General. She consulted her top aides, asked what she should do. They all told her that they should go forward. Now, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, we talked to him earlier today, and he made clear that there was concern about the safety of law enforcement officials and Elian Gonzalez.
The American people will understand that we had information that there were weapons in the house. I don't know if that's true or not. We have to do a debriefing of the agents. But given that fact, we had to make sure that our agents, when they went in there, were able to protect themselves and make sure that they could get Elian out in a way that was most protective of him as well. We didn't go in there with an intention to intimidate anybody. We used a female agent to bring him out who spoke Spanish. We tried to be as sensitive as we possibly could, understanding that this was ultimately a law enforcement operation.
They tell us that the whole operation was over in about 3 minutes, in and out of the house, but clearly those images that are coming from the home, the picture of the boy and the weapons, are ones that the law enforcement officials will have to answer questions about. Judy?
All right, Pierre Thomas at the Justice Department. Thanks. Gene.
And we have some pictures shot by the Associated Press this morning of Elian Gonzalez's removal from the home of his great-uncle, Lázaro Gonzalez, in Miami, Florida, in the Little Havana section. And this is a picture which has stirred so much controversy. One of the federal agents brandishing a weapon as he tries to wrest control of the boy from one of the fishermen who rescued him 5 months ago in the waters off Florida. And here now is the picture of the boy with his father after they have been reunited. This is at Andrews Air Force Base, and we're told by a witness to the reunion he was all smiles, he was very happy, he was affectionate toward his father. Once again, the scene was Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington after the boy's flight from Florida early this morning. Judy?
President Clinton is praising the Attorney General, Janet Reno, and her handling of the Elian Gonzalez case. Mr. Clinton gave a brief statement to reporters at the White House this morning, and CNN's Kelly Wallace has more on that. Kelly.
Well, Judy, the message from the White House is that the President and the Attorney General were certainly hoping this early morning raid could have been avoided. The White House says every effort was made to try and bring about a voluntary transfer of custody, but the President said when all efforts failed, it was the right thing to do to uphold the law and to reunite the boy with his father, Juan Miguel Gonzalez. Now, in his statement earlier this morning outside the White House, Mr. Clinton said he knows this case is difficult for so many people, but in his eyes, he believes this case is about a 6-year-old boy who lost his mother on a journey from Cuba to Florida, and a boy who belongs with his father.
This was in the end about a little boy who lost his mother and has not seen his father in more than 5 months. I hope with time and support, Elian and his father will have the opportunity to be a strong family again.
And there is more criticism coming in, though, of the administration's handling of this case. Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott issued a statement this morning saying the use of this type of force clearly was not justified. Negotiations were ongoing. He said when he saw what was happening and saw the pictures on TV, his first thought was that this is something that only happens in Fidel Castro's communist Cuba.